Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of 30 Albums for 30 Years, 1964 till 1994, where we take a look and a listen to the most impactful albums between those years, 1964 and 1994, and we do it chronologically by release date. So the plan is 30 albums per year for 30 years. That's a whole lot of albums, so let's see if I can make it that far. I am your host, Jay Sweet. In today's podcast, we will be checking out Otis Redding's 1964 release, Pain in My Heart, released March of 1964, recorded between 1963 and 1964. Great album. You're in for a real treat. Alright, cats, let's get into it. Otis Redding, Pain in My Heart at Go Records. Again, released March of 1964, recorded between 1963 and 1964. So every one of Otis Redding's albums have received at least 4 out of 5 stars from the Rolling Stone Album Guide, which means that according to their reviewers, he is at least excellent and most often essential. That is because singer Otis Redding had a golden voice that oozed emotion. The guy could sing the phone book, and it would be awesome. Don't know what a phone book is? Well, Google it. With the death of Sam Cooke in 1964 came the emergence of Otis Redding. The singer offered an alternate Southern approach to soul music that added some contrast to Motown's hit factory. Motown recordings often relied on heavy layering that included strings and auxiliary percussion, and Otis Redding's recordings offered a more Southern gospel approach that more heavily featured horns than strings. Also, Motown artists were backed by an incredibly slick house rhythm section called the Funk Brothers. Redding's recordings were connected to Stax Studios. They had their own fantastic rhythm section called Booker T and the MGs. The MGs offered a more organic and raw backing than the polished Funk Brothers, giving Otis Redding's recordings a specific sound. All right, let's learn a little bit about Otis Redding. He was born in Dawson, Georgia on September 9th, 1941, and grew up in Macon, Georgia. Like many Southern soul artists, he first began singing in the church. His earliest influences were Little Richard and Sam Cooke, and Otis Redding began singing semi-professionally on the radio as a young teen. The singer was then forced to leave school at age 15 when his father contracted tuberculosis. During this time, he worked as a well digger and a gas station attendant while continuing to sing and play piano at local establishments. In 1958, Otis Redding performed in a local talent contest and came to the attention of a known guitarist in the area named Johnny Jenkins. The two teamed up and began earning money by entering regional music competitions. After touring the Chitlin circuit with bands like Pat T. Cake and the Mighty Panthers and the Upsetters, which was Little Richard's old band, Otis Redding began to cut a few recordings of his own in Los Angeles. He was then invited to Stax Studios in 1962, where he recorded These Arms of Mine and Hey Hey Baby. Released on Stax's sister company, Volt, the Volt label, These Arms of Mine sold tremendously, 800,000 copies. All right, so let's discuss the album and Otis Redding's later life and career. It was a short life and a short career, sadly. In 1963, Otis Redding made a celebrated appearance at the Apollo Theater, and in 1964, he released the debut album, Pain in My Heart, the album we are discussing today. The record showcased the song These Arms of Mine and previously recorded singles from 1962 through 1963. So the album was basically a compilation of singles and B-sides. The record only reached 103rd on the Billboard charts, mostly because Redding's audience at the time was limited to African American fans. By 1964 and 1965, he had not yet had the crossover success with white markets needed to bring him to the next level of fame. So Redding decided to do something about it, and in 1966, he made the bold move to perform for predominantly white audiences at rock clubs along the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. The response was tremendous. In 1967, Otis Redding recorded a highly successful duet album with singer Carla Thomas called King and Queen, released on the Stax Atlantic label. The record went certified gold. In 1967, Otis Redding was invited to close the Saturday night lineup at the highly publicized Monterey Pop Festival. His performance was magical, and the mainstream media took notice. And with the performance and the press that it received, Otis Redding finally began to enjoy superstardom and considerable wealth. Now, sadly, Redding's career in life came to a screeching halt when his airplane crashed into Lake Montana, killing the singer, 4 bandmates, a valet, and the pilot on December 9th of 1967 while on their way to a gig. Redding was only 26 years old. 3 days before the crash, Otis Redding, who was inspired by the Beatles' record, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, recorded a tune intended to showcase a new creative direction. The song was Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. The song became a #1 hit, as people still had tremendous pain in their hearts over the singer's untimely death. Alright, time to drop the needle on the record. Track 1 of side 1 is the hit Pain in My Heart. The song was written by New Orleans rhythm and blues legend Allen Toussaint, and this is soul with a capital S. It's just a fantastic cut. Nobody sells pain better than Otis Redding. The backing of the MGs and the horn arrangement fill my heart. It's a great track, and the single peaked at number 60 on the Billboard pop charts. Pain in My Heart. Track 2 is The Dog. The Dog is essentially Redding's response to the Chubby Checkers dance hit, The Twist. I have no clue how to do the dog dance, but when Redding sings it, I kind of want to try. I mean, man, what a voice. Track number 3 is Stand By Me. This is Redding's version of a 1961 hit by Benny King. I'm sure you've heard it before. Redding and the MG's version has more grit than the original, and we stand by Otis Redding. Stand By Me. The next track is Hey Hey Baby, a jump blues written by Otis Redding. The tune is high energy and perfectly performed. Now take notice of the guitar solo played by Steve Cropper, who is never overly flashy but always tasteful. This tune just flat out grooves. Hey Hey Baby. The fifth track of side 1 is a remake of the Sam Cooke classic You Send Me. Redding was a huge fan of Sam Cooke, and this is a fitting tribute. 1964 would see the murder of Sam Cooke a few months after this release, and the beginning of a greater awareness of Otis Redding. Both men have been called the King of Soul, and both were 2 stars whose lights burnt out way too soon. You send me. The final track of side 1 is I Need Your Lovin'. The song was a popular R&B tune recorded by Don Gardner and D.D. Ford in 1962. Take notice of the song's false ending. The party starts, stops, and then starts up again. Based on the lyrics, Otis Redding needed a lot of love, and he would eventually get it from the American public, and he has been rewarded posthumously with a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award and inductions into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Songwriters Hall of Fame. Alright, so now it's time to flip the record and drop the needle on side number 2. Track number 1 is These Arms of Mine, an Otis Redding original ballad and an absolute classic. It's one of the greatest ballads ever recorded, and is certainly an album highlight. Although it peaked at only number 85 on the Billboard charts, the track eventually reached gold status. Now, check out Johnny Jenkins' guitar work on the track, and the lyrics, of course, speak of loneliness and yearning. So open your arms and hearts and embrace this classic, These Arms of Mine. The next track is the 3-chord classic, Louie Louie. The song was initially recorded by Richard Berry and the Pharaohs in 1955, and in 1963, the Kingsmen had a huge hit with their version of the song. The lyrics are about a Jamaican sailor returning to the island to see his girl. I really never quite understood the song's appeal. It is basic in every way, but of the many recorded versions, Otis Redding's might be the best. Louie Louie. The next track is Something Is Worrying Me, which served as the B-side to the single Pain in My Heart. The tune is pretty joyful for someone who is worried about his relationship. It's a solid album track that I believe was strong enough to have been released as an A-side. Something Is Worrying Me. The next track is Security. Security was an original composition and a minor hit for Otis Redding. It's got a serious groove and some well-played and well-placed horn figures. After the release of Pain in My Heart, Redding would have some security, at least financially. This next track is That's What My Heart Needs. The song has a similar groove to These Arms of Mine, and many of Redding's songs are in 6/8 time, with the guitars playing arpeggiated figures, which is broken chords. 6/8 time basically means that the rhythm is divided into 6 beats per section. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count along. Now check out how the arrangement builds dynamically throughout, and Redding clearly spends a lot of time thinking about his heart. I don't know, maybe he should have seen a cardiologist? That's what my heart needs. The final track on the original LP is Lucille. Lucille was a big hit for Little Richard in 1957 and is a strong album closer. Otis Redding does an excellent job on this remake, and check out the sax solo by Packy Axton. Lucille. All right, my friends, lift the needle from the record, put put the record back in its jacket and back on the shelf. We did it. We made it to the end. And we are better for it. So in conclusion, Pain in My Heart is a fantastic debut album by one of the generation's greatest voices. There's really not a disappointing track on the entire record. Besides his technical vocal prowess, Redding has a certain quality or an it factor that traditional analysis cannot explain. And the backing band of the MGs also helped to give his music a distinct sound that created a perfect blend of soul and R&B. Once again, I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. It's really a lot of fun making them, learning about the albums, and presenting them to you. And if you like what you've heard and want to learn more about the albums or the show, please check out the website, 30albumsfor30years.com. Also check us out on social media. We are on Facebook and Instagram. And I want to mention my book, The History of American Music, 1750 to 1950, an origin story, which is available from Kendall Hunt Publishers. You can check that out as well. Thanks again, and together, let's keep the music alive. Hey guys, thanks for hanging out for the Jay Plays bonus section. For this cast, I decided to do a version of These Arms of Mine. Again, these are little home demos, and I just love this song, and I did it with just two guitars and really kind of a stripped-down version. When I think of Otis Redding, I feel such joy, but also such sadness that the guy was gone at such a young age, and I try to portray that through my interpretation of this tune. I hope you enjoy, and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Thanks so much.